Do you remember the events when you signed on to this project? Did you think about like where were you, what was happening, and do you remember all the news reports about Amerithrax,
I,
basically?
I remember it absolutely. And as you know, 9/11 had just happened. So that was kind of top of mind. And we all thought that this was an extension of that, that these terrorists were coming from another continent somewhere. And when we began to realize that maybe this was domestic terrorism, we got really freaked out. And I actually canceled a trip back east during this time. I was going to go back for, I forget why, but I canceled the trip um, because of the anthrax attack. And I remember that we were told to go out and buy duct tape in case somebody with a crop duster, went over our city and dusted us with anthrax. We could duct tape the windows closed and keep the anthrax out. And so I did that. I went out. I had little babies at the time, and I went out and bought a lot of duct tape.
Wow. Wow. So you were preparing for some sort of, we didn't know, terrorist attack, pandemic. Coming on into the role, stepping into the shoes of Tom Brokaw, what kind of research? I guess the first thing I have to ask is, did you speak with Tom Brokaw?
I did not speak with Tom Brokaw, but I did. There's a tremendous amount of material on Tom Brokaw out there, so it's very rich in terms of doing research. I of course watched his broadcast. The internet is a font of information, and I listened to his books because he's written many books and he's done the audio version of all of them.
Yeah.
So I was able to listen to those over and over again and get a feeling not just for his cadence and how he speaks, but also for who he was as a human being. Because we saw him as a news broadcaster, and you see him giving a speech from now and then. But you got to read his books to find out what kind of a man he is, and that was, I think, really important for me because he has a kind of gravitas that I wanted to be very respectful of when I did it. I did not want to do something sort of a stupid impression of him.
No, and it wasn't at all. In fact, I closed my eyes and listened, and I thought, gosh, this is an incredible, your voice and speech diction. I know you said you listened to him. Did you have any voice and speech training? Do you ever do that for roles, or do you just sort of go with your own research?
Well, I'm pretty well trained when it comes vocally when it comes to that, so I don't need to go out to someone unless I absolutely have to. But his voice is much deeper than mine, so I did spend a month or so working on that, just trying to get down. I'm not sure I was successful at getting that. It's pretty hard to change your vocal cords around, but I think it was an approximation. I mean, I went and watched Anthony Hopkins doing Nixon, see how he did that. To approximate someone as iconic as Tom Brokaw. I didn't want to muck it up by trying to do an impression. But I also wanted to be able to evoke the gravitas and the Tom Brokaw isms that made him such a respectful news broadcaster.
When did you guys shoot this? Was it at all during the pandemic?
Oh yeah, I mean the pandemic was still going on, so yes,
Yeah.
we shot it last spring, in early spring in Toronto. So I had to quarantine for 14 days, and then Daniel Kim got exposed, so he had to quarantine for 14 days. So for me, it ended up being like a 28-day quarantine.
Wow. So tell me, what is it like as an actor going from a set pre-pandemic to during the pandemic? How is it for you guys as far as chemistry? Obviously, you have to have your masks on, then you take them off. Does it change anything as far as rehearsing and on-set energy?
Well, it's very different because you're wearing a plastic mask and then a cloth mask, and it's yeah. I mean, you have to stand 6 feet apart. You can't get too close together. It's yeah, I mean, it definitely changes the dynamic on the set. Whether it changed the performance in any way, I don't think so. I think the performances all would have been exactly the same had we been in a different situation.
Somebody, obviously, you spoke at the beginning about your experience when this anthrax scare happened, but reading the script, filming it, did you learn new things about this investigation? Because I feel like this show is really a learning point for a time in American history.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was only so much we got from the news broadcast at the time. And this takes us deep inside in a three-dimensional way what was actually happening at the time behind the scenes with the FBI and the medical community. So yeah, it's a real learning piece as well.
Wonderful. Well, what would you like people to take away from this? I mean, obviously, it's extremely timely and whatnot. But my final question is, I guess, what would you like people to take away from this second season?
Well, I mean, I think people have to be cognizant and aware that there are people out there who are always going to try to mess things up. And particularly in this digital world now, that was the halcyon days of the analog world. Now it's much easier to slip a bit of code into the wrong place and mess things up that way. So we just have to be very careful and very cognizant of how we make our way through this digital world.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Harry. Again, congratulations. And I look forward to all of America watching it.
Right.
Thank you.